Hi everybody, welcome to BlackAmericana. I'm Ashley, and in today's episode, we are looking at the life and legacy of Shakir Stewart. Shakir was a music industry innovator who curated the soundtrack of a generation. Before we go any further, let me say, I did not know Shakir Stewart, and I do not have an inside track into his life. The information shared in this episode comes from research and details given by those who knew him. We know this is a sensitive matter, so we are not here to force any narrative on you. If you want to double check any of the information you hear in this episode, you can check our description box for our sources. Ultimately, we hope this episode brings humanity back to his legacy. Please enjoy. Shakir Stewart was born on April 12, 1974 to Portia Montgomery Stewart and Kenneth Stewart. Raised in Oakland, California, he was born an only child. His parents divorced when he was 2, but his father remained involved in his life. His mother embraced Afrocentrism, and when he was around 5, she married Aubrey LeBrie, an attorney heavily involved in the local Black Power and Black arts movements. Through this marriage, Shakir gained a stepsister. In his teen years, his father would have a daughter. Shakir, nicknamed Shake as a child, was recognized by those he met for his focus and flair early in life. Shakir's father, Kenneth, was a fine dresser, and Shakir styled himself accordingly. He was infatuated with the Bay Area's emerging hip-hop scene, with West Coast rap pioneer Richie Rich being an early influence too. Rich said, "He was always fresh. He was the same as a youngster. When Ralph Lauren was hot, he had every color polo." He spent much of his free time hanging out with his godbrothers Raheem Smith, known as Smacks, and Herb Smith, the sons of one of his mother's best friends. Herb introduced him to the New York hip-hop scene. Shakir was unique in that he appeared to fall in love with business as soon as he did music. His friend Festo recalled that Shakir carried a briefcase instead of a book bag in elementary school. His mother enrolled him in an all-boys Catholic school, with him coming into his own at St. Mary's College High School. In the 1980s, Oakland was changing, as all major American cities were. Smacks recalled, "Shakir definitely was a product of the streets. That's one thing that's unique about Oakland, regardless of your financial status. You always end up dealing with the streets because there's not much separation. People who got money live on the hill, but you got to come off the hill." Shakir, seeing a wide spectrum of the Black American experience, enhanced his ability to present art with nuance and authenticity. He started to learn more about the music industry through his childhood friend Sean Granberry. Sean is the nephew of Thomas McElroy, who, along with Denzel Foster, makes up the duo that created In Vogue and mentored Tony. Shakir and his friends would visit their studio, and McElroy noticed that while other kids were fascinated by the celebrity, Shakir was more focused on how the studio functioned. Shakir was also ready to start making his own money, so he and Sean started throwing teen parties in the Bay. They were able to draw a crowd of 2,000, charging $5 a head. By 1989, he had picked up work as a club promoter too. But he knew how to influence people at school as well, with him being elected senior class president and serving as president of the California statewide Black Student Union. His ability to negotiate across sectors would be a trait that would define his life. After graduating from St. Mary's, he enrolled at the historically Black Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. His college years were remarkable, but also marred by tragedy. In junior high school, he fell in love with a girl from the Bay named Markel Lenore. Although they had their breakups and makeups as kids do, people around them noticed they had something special. She enrolled at another HBCU, Hampton University in Virginia. While driving to Atlanta to visit him, she tragically passed away in a car accident. His friend Sean said, "We had all, growing up, had seen this as his soulmate. They were connected some kind of way. Everybody saw it. That affected him a lot. He was really heartbroken." His godbrother Smacks also said that messed him up. That was real devastating to him. Shakir seemed to manage his grief by focusing on work, but he continued to honor Markel. Throughout his career, he kept a picture of her in his office. Shakir started throwing parties in Atlanta. He struck up a friendship with fellow future music executive Kenny Burns, and with Kenny being a student at nearby Morris Brown, the two teamed up to dominate the local college party scene. Shakir also worked with Rico Wade of Organized Noise. He and other Oakland natives that had made their way to Atlanta, Chris Hicks, Ryan Glover, and Henry Nooney Lee, formed Ivory Coast Entertainment, an event promotions company. Shakir began to promote concerts for artists like Scarface, Nas, and Too Short. But Shakir didn't forget the reason he came to Morehouse. Richie Rich recalled, "He was always assertive about going to school. He kept his head in the books. I remember going to Atlanta for Freaknik 93, and some of the guys he hung out with lost focus during the time I was down there, but not him. He hung out, but he ain't missed no classes either." He graduated from Morehouse with a Bachelor of Science in Marketing in 1996. After college, he used the profits from his work as a promoter to again team up with his cohorts from Ivory Coast Entertainment. They purchased a recording studio and started a music production company called Noontime. They quickly assembled a stable of producers, which caught the eye of Sean Puff Daddy Combs. His label Bad Boy Records was seeking a new identity after the loss of the notorious B.I.G. Several Noontime producers became a part of Bad Boy's in-house production team, the Hitmen, such as J-Dub. Noontime then entered into a co-management agreement with Bad Boy Records. Soon, Noontime was finalizing a partnership with Epic Records, but as the deal was closing, Shakir found himself squeezed out. It is unclear what exactly happened, but whatever it was, it didn't destroy his relationship with Noontime. He and the remaining founders would go on to do business together over the years, as you'll hear more about in this episode. When reminiscing on Shakir, Chris Hicks said, "He was a real ally. We had a healthy competition, but we were also there for each other." It wasn't long until another power player in the industry noticed Shakir. LaRonda Sutton was the general manager of Hitco Music Publishing, founded by music impresario Antonio L.A. Reid. LaRonda saw Shakir had a pulse on the youth and asked him about joining Hitco in an A&R position. Shakir didn't know much about publishing, and years later revealed he didn't even want the job. But he accepted the opportunity to meet L.A. Reid, and the two clicked immediately. In L.A.'s memoir, Sing to Me, my story of making music, finding magic, and searching for who's next, he said, quote, "We hung out a few times. He was easy to like, a cultural kind of guy, always had a one-liner. I told LaRonda to bring him aboard," end quote. And just like that, Shakir was the creative director of Hitco. LA provided thorough on-the-job training, and Shakir caught on quickly. LA said, "I liked him from the beginning. As the company started to grow, I started to see he was really talented and exceptionally charismatic." One day, Matthew Knowles, father and then manager of Beyonce, approached LA about Beyonce securing a publishing deal with Hitco. LA told Shakir to make it happen, recalling, "Shakir jumped all over it. He developed a close rapport with Beyonce and her father, started placing the songs, and handled the account. The sign of a great executive is if you assign them a superstar project and you never get a bad phone call. Then you know they're doing their job. My phone never rang once with Shakir on the case. He would become one of my closest associates." So to really understand Shakir's impact, let's talk about a few of the responsibilities of a music publisher. A music publisher manages the artist's musical copyright, ensures proper compensation, often referred to as splits, and secures licensing to radio, TV, and film. The publisher also tries to get the song placed with a preferred label or artist. Shakir explained to Billboard, quote, "At the end of the day, my job is to make the right decision in placing a song. I have to find the best home, best artist, and best label for a song so that it can get the maximum exposure it deserves." As Shakir's career blossomed, his persona became his own legend. Standing at 6'1", his personality and wardrobe made him a staple of the nightlife. Jermaine Dupri said, quote, "Every party I ever had, Shakir was there. That was mandatory for me to make sure my man came to my party because I wanted to see what kind of suit he had on. He was basically Flavor Flav when it came to them parties." In 2000, L.A. Reid was appointed the president/CEO of Arista Records, but was facing a hostile situation because Clive Davis was nudged out of the seat. L.A. needed reinforcement and hired Shakir as A&R for LaFace and Arista. He also promoted Shakir to general manager of Hitco and later senior vice president. Shakir was young enough to be L.A.'s son, but L.A. acknowledged their dynamic was unique, saying, "In a strange way, he was a mentor to me. He was my gateway to youth culture, and I was his gateway to what we'll call mature refinement. So I would tell him what kind of house you needed to have, and he would explain to me what kind of bottle you needed to hold when you're in the club." Much of the research in this episode comes from a profile Vibe magazine did on Shakir in its December 2009 issue titled "Death of a Salesman" by Linda Hobbs. It is some of the finest journalism Vibe has ever done, but the article is incredibly hard to find now. Fortunately, I have a copy. In this profile, L.A. identified 7 men who were his music industry sons: Shakir Stewart, Diddy, Dallas Austin, Jermaine Dupri, Usher, Tricky Stewart, who is not related to Shakir, and the now late Rico Wade. But when L.A. Reid married in 2000, a family feud broke out. L.A. Reid exchanged vows with the former Erica Holton. The glitterati of the music industry arrived in Capri, Italy for the 3-day event. Puff Daddy had caught wind Shakir and his ex-girlfriend Kim Porter were dating. After the ceremony, Puffy confronted Shakir in his hotel and broke a chair over his head. The incident left Shakir in stitches, and Puffy allegedly threatened to end Shakir's life. According to several of Shakir's friends, L.A. quickly diffused the situation, as Shakir and Puffy both worked for him, but others say tensions lingered. For context, remember the power paradigm of the industry in the early 2000s. L.A. Reid co-founded LaFace Records with Kenny Babyface Edmonds, which was distributed by Arista Records in 1989. As L.A. transitioned from being a composer to a full-time executive, he fielded marquee acts like Toni Braxton, T.O.C., Usher, and Outkast. A January 2001 profile of L.A. Reid in New York Magazine illustrated the loyalty between L.A. and Puffy. Puffy heaped praise on L.A. for facilitating the meeting for his fledgling Bad Boy Records to be distributed by Arista in 1993. As L.A. sought to move up the music industry food chain, he touted being the conduit between Bad Boy and Arista as one of his finest achievements. When Puffy was asked in a New York profile how he felt about L.A. now being his boss, he responded with his legendary hubris. "Get the F out of here. I'm my own boss. He's my partner." The Puffy and L.A. connection runs much deeper, but to put it simply, Shakir was in an awkward position. Shakir's mother, Portia, had a more ominous view of the situation. In a May 2024 expose in Rolling Stone, she recalled her concern, saying, quote, "That's when I said you need to get out of this business. This man is crazy." Were Portia's words simply those of a worried mother, or was Shakir more transparent about his apprehension with his mother than with his friends? Being that Shakir seemingly pledged blind loyalty to L.A., one has to wonder how he internalized the incident. When speaking on the Shakir-L.A. dynamic, Kenny Burns said, quote, "Shake seems to have been infatuated with L.A. Reid. He idolized L.A. That's one thing I never understood. Not saying that L.A. is not worthy of being admired, but Shake was definitely into dude." Shakir was maturing alongside his artists, namely Beyonce and Usher. He had a strong feel for their strengths and the new territories they could conquer. One day, hit co-songwriter EVP presented Shakir with a song he wrote with Usher in mind called Dangerously in Love. Shakir heard the song and felt it would be a better fit for Beyonce. She loved the song and it was placed on Destiny's Child's Survivor album. And of course, Beyonce so loved the song, she revised it again for her solo debut album of the same name. But perhaps his highest risk and highest reward under Hitco and LaFace came on Usher's fourth studio album, Confessions. In 2003, a relatively unknown songwriter named Sean Garrett signed to Hitco. Sean took a Lil Jon beat and crafted the demo for a song called Yeah. Shakir immediately knew the song was a hit, but Usher was insulted when he heard it. Usher was trying to solidify himself as the premier R&B singer of his generation, so he felt the song wasn't a fit. Reid was also nervous it lacked the refinement he wanted Usher to have. Yeah went through several tweaks, but Shakir remained steadfast. Yeah needed to be the first single. The risk paid off. We won't come close to listing all of Shakir's accomplishments as an A&R and publisher, but between 2003 to 2004, music he handled spent at least a total of 53 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. During Shakir's tenure, Hitco became the #1 boutique music publisher in the world. Shakir also signed Ciara, a protege of Jazzy Faye, who was also under the umbrella of his old friends at Noontime. But just before Usher's Confessions was released, Reid was fired after the parent company determined he underperformed. LA took Shakir and several other friends to Miami with him to reset after his ouster. He and Shakir were driving down to the famed Biltmore Hotel when LA received an offer to serve as the chairman and CEO of the Island Def Jam music group. It was an easy yes for LA, but he was warned Def Jam was more of a street label. For context, the Island Def Jam music group was a unit that housed Island Records and Def Jam Records. Island Records is more rock-oriented, and Def Jam, of course, is a hip-hop institution. In LA's book, he described the first time he walked the corridors of Def Jam, saying, "As I walked around the floors, the office felt dangerous, unruly. There were a lot of gang colors. There was definitely sort of a crime syndicate feel, far from my world. My music was always polished, not sugar-coated candy pop, but not street. There was an edge to the physical space that was unlike any other office I'd been in." End quote. The backlash to LA's hire was swift, and LA again wanted Shakir as reinforcement, but Shakir's life had changed. In 2002, he and his girlfriend Michelle Rivers welcomed a baby girl, Michaela. Michelle, a native of Long Island, New York, and daughter of former NFL player Jamie Rivers, met Shakir in 1996 while a student at Spelman College. According to Shakir's god brother Smacks, she was the first woman he had feelings for since losing his childhood sweetheart. Now, I know some of you might be hearing these dates and saying, now wait a minute. Well, by Michelle's own admission, Shakir was a playboy. Still, she says he was a dedicated father. In the 2009 Vibe article, Michelle recalled their tension around Shakir taking the Island Def Jam job, saying, "It was his decision ultimately, but it was a battle. When you make records, you're gone all the time." When asked why he took the position, Michelle felt Shakir took the job out of loyalty to LA. She said, "Shakir and LA were close. I mean, extremely. If you ask people who was allowed to stay at the house in the Hamptons, who stayed in his office until 2 in the morning every night, who did he tell his secrets to? That was Shakir." But Smacks remembers Shakir was cautious about the move, saying, "He was excited, but he was also apprehensive. Growing up, Def Jam was always a big label, but it's also an East Coast label. People didn't know he was from Oakland. All they knew is that he lives in Atlanta." Whatever his reservations, Shakir was on board as VP of A&R for Island Def Jam by the fall. Even with the move, LA and Shakir were still attentive to the talent on LaFace. Shakir selected the song he thought would launch Ciara, Goodies, and he was right. It was another Sean Garrett tune and reinforced the emergence of Southern sounds in the mainstream. Shakir loved hip-hop but preferred working with R&B because he saw R&B as more lucrative. That all changed one day in 2004 when his old friend Noonie, via Jazzy Faye, gave him a demo of a rapper named Young Jeezy. Shakir played Young Jeezy's music for Reid and wanted to sign him, but according to Shakir warned him, quote, "Young Jeezy's from the streets. I don't know if you really want to get mixed up with him or not." Jeezy was being courted by several labels, but he was confident in Shakir, saying in his book, Adversity for Sale, You Gotta Believe, quote, "He was a special dude. He just had that energy about him that you see a lot on cats from the Bay. Like, he was the type who walk in and immediately light up a room. He was funny, flashy, and cool, and he really knew music." Young Jeezy went to the Def Jam office, and after an impressive audition, LA gave the green light to sign Jeezy. LA told Jeezy, quote, "First of all, I'd like to sign you to Island Def Jam. Whatever you're doing, stop. I got you from here." As optimistic as Jeezy was about Shakir, he waited to sign to Def Jam. Let's talk about some of the factors. Jeezy had a creative detour and briefly joined the group Boys in the Hood. Diddy was developing his Bad Boy South roster and was looking to make a southern version of NWA. Kim Porter suggested to him that he add Jeezy to the group. During this time, Jeezy was gaining a loyal following with his mixtapes, but he decided to toy with the idea. Boys in the Hood started to catch fire, and Diddy began pressing Jeezy daily to sign with Bad Boy South/Atlantic. Another issue that popped up was Jeezy's association with BMF, also known as Black Mafia Family. In Jeezy's words, quote, "First things first, I was never a BMF artist and I never did a deal with BMF Entertainment. I know a lot of people assume that's what was going on, including a lot of people in the crew, but that was never the case. We were always our own separate entities," end quote. Jeezy considered BMF co-founder Demetrius Big Mish Flannery to be like family. But according to BMF Entertainment rapper Blue Da Vinci, BMF was hoping Jeezy would sign to their imprint, which would in turn allow them to get the label deal they had been longing for. In Jeezy's book, he recalled an incident while at Big Mish's stepfather's house. "One day, when I was still going back and forth with Def Jam on the details of the deal, I was over at the house and this New York cat who used to run with them asked me to come downstairs. He had a reputation for being a wild dude, and I'd heard enough stories to know he earned it too. When we got downstairs, he threw a Louis Vuitton duffel on the pool table and said he wanted me to sign with BMF. I was like, man, I appreciate it, but I'm good. He unzipped the bag. There must have been something like $2 million in cash in there at least. I'm not asking you, I'm telling you," he said. "We want you to sign with us." I started looking for the exits, any loose pool cues lying around, anything that might give me an advantage. Of course, I had that thing on me, but I didn't want to take it there unless that's where it had to go. I stood firm. I'm saying I appreciate what you're talking about and all that, but I've got this Def Jam situation going on and I'm planning on doing that. I knew he was about that trigger play and I could tell he was getting hot. Like I said, I'm not asking, he said through his teeth. You're signing with us, end quote. According to Jeezy, he had invested millions of his own money to start his rap career and didn't want to sign with anyone else. Shakir successfully signed Young Jeezy to Def Jam under Jeezy's own imprint, Corporate Thugs Entertainment. The Vibe article describes Shakir making the move as a delicate situation, but he got it done. Jeezy also signed a one-album deal for Boys in the Hood, and the group's album and his solo debut album were having scheduling conflicts. This situation was handled without Shakir, with Jeezy, Reid, and then Def Jam president Jay-Z sorting things out with Diddy. Young Jeezy's debut album, Let's Get It, Thug Motivation 101, was released in the summer of 2005 and went on to sell over 2 million copies. Perhaps Shakir's biggest contribution to the album was convincing Jeezy to release Soul Survivor. Jeezy was weary of the song because he feared it was too commercial, but Shakir knew it was a hit. The song ended up being Jeezy's first top 5 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. It wasn't long before Jeezy was back in the studio working on his follow-up album. One night in 2006, while he was recording in Miami, Shakir stopped by and they later hit the club. The night quickly went left. Jeezy recalled, quote, "But as we headed to our section, I saw Blue Da Vinci posted up with some of his people, and I just knew it was going to be a problem. It wasn't that we had beef exactly. It was more so that he was just on that list of cats who I knew was feeling some type of way because of everything that had been going on. And then that was especially true with him because for BMF Entertainment, he was supposed to be the one. And even though I felt I'd done everything I could to help him out, for whatever reasons, the music thing wasn't really working for him, and it was for me." So if you ask me, that's where the static was coming from. And as we were leaving the club, some words were exchanged, and the next thing you know, everybody was out in the street in the middle of this big brawl. I was so sick of people playing with me. There was no way I was about to back down, and then Cass started letting them things go. I'm talking firecrackers right there in the middle of South Beach like it's nothing. Shakir, Jeezy, and 2 other guys in a vehicle with them were arrested for weapons possession. Jeezy claimed the weapons belonged to Shakir and another passenger. Whoever owned them, Jeezy was charged with possession of both. After the case against Jeezy fell apart, Shakir pled no contest to the charge and received probation. Jeezy released his second album, Thug Motivation 102, The Inspiration, in 2006, and he largely credited Shakir for the sound of the album. Shakir started looking further south for talent. He told Reid about a Miami rapper named Rick Ross. recalled the first time Shakir played Hustlin', saying, "In 2006, while we were vacationing together with our families in Saint-Tropez, he played me a record called Hustlin' by a rapper named Rick Ross. It was such a definitive record, I didn't need to audition him or even meet with him. I just relied on another great record man and his recommendation, and Shakir signed him." In less than a year, Shakir had reinvented himself as a gatekeeper of Southern hip-hop, and by the fall of 2006, he had been promoted to Senior VP of A&R for Island Def Jam. Shakir, of course, was approached by other companies, but according to his godbrother Smacks, quote, "He was very loyal to LA. People offered him money and tried to cause dissension between them, and he never wavered." Shakir worked on other projects at Island Def Jam. He worked alongside Jay-Z to spearhead Rihanna's Good Girl Gone Bad and Graduation from Kanye West. He also served as a governor on the voting board for the Recording Academy, the organization that presents the Grammys. When songwriter and producer The Dream decided to pursue a career as an artist, Shakir, alongside fellow music exec Karen Kwok, made it happen. When The Dream was asked about the start of his singing career in a 2022 interview with GQ, he said, quote, "I told Def Jam execs Shakir Stewart and Karen Kwok about the idea of even becoming an artist, which happened just out of thin air. There was no pre-plan for it. Her and Shakir were like, alright, cool, bet." Also in 2007, his family expanded. He and Michelle welcomed a son named Sebastian. Michelle described Shakir as attentive during both pregnancies, saying, "Shakir went to every doctor's appointment. He was very calm during Michaela's delivery and birth. With Sebastian, he was more nervous. He cried the first time he held each of them." Michelle was never fond of the music industry, and despite Shakir being a legend on the party scene, she didn't go to the clubs with him either. They enjoyed more traditional date nights, dinners, movie dates, and the like. When asked how she learned to accept the dynamic, she explained she saw Shakir as the family man and Shake, his nickname, as his alter ego. She said, "I used to look at it like you have Sean Combs and you have Puffy." One of his favorite places to shine was Las Vegas. Reid said, "We used to go to Vegas to gamble, and Shakir would pop so much ish to the dealers and waitresses, he would draw a crowd wherever he was gambling." But those closest to Shakir knew he was deeply insecure. Although he was still young, he did not seem to evolve past the need to party. His godbrother Smacks asked him why he couldn't stop. According to the Vibe profile, Shakir answered, quote, "Smacks, I got to be honest with you, man. Sometimes I'm just not happy. I don't like to be alone." His mentor, L.A. Reid, was going through his own identity crisis. His son, Aaron Reid, became a teen sensation of sorts when his episode of MTV's My Super Sweet 16 became a pop culture moment in 2006. L.A. recalled one time hanging out with Aaron and Usher in East Hampton, and a group of youngsters completely ignored him and Usher to get Aaron's autograph. When L.A. went to the Super Bowl in 2007, several young girls referred to him as Aaron Reid's father. That's when L.A. had enough. He wrote, quote, "On one hand, it made me chuckle, but on the other, it kind of got to me. It might sound petty, but it touched a nerve because, in truth, I was struggling a bit with not getting recognized for what I'd accomplished. A part of me had begun to worry that perhaps I was fated for a behind-the-scenes role in life. It had been that way for me all along. Babyface's partner, Pebble's husband, Usher's producer, and now Aaron's father. Even as chairman of Island Def Jam, I took a back seat to Jay-Z. I was still itching to leave my mark in some definitive way on the music business and have my deed acknowledged. I had to overcome criticism and doubt when I took over both Arista and Def Jam, and even after I turned out massive hits at both companies, I did not feel the respect I earned. For basically my entire adult life, I had experienced nothing but success in the music business. My fingerprints were on some of the biggest records of the day, but I did not feel my recognition matched my accomplishments." L.A. Reid had a major chance to prove himself when Jay-Z resigned in December 2007. Shakir later revealed he was surprised by Jay's departure, but Jay-Z filled Shakir in on the projects pending on Def Jam's calendar for a smooth transition. During one of their conversations, Jay-Z told Shakir he was too smart to run Def Jam and should consider starting his own business that would have global reach. Shakir relayed this conversation to his childhood friend Sean Granberry during one of their visits to Las Vegas. Shakir brainstormed a concept called Hip Hop TV, which would be a global hub for hip hop culture. Shakir knew that hip hop was a driving force in global commerce, but boardrooms rarely had anyone from hip hop culture developing the concepts. So creators will have the opportunity to upload music, television shows, movies, or other ideas that would then be vetted and potentially parlayed into bigger opportunities. In a world before Instagram and TikTok, hip-hop TV was a novel concept. The new year, 2008, came in and Jay-Z's seat will remain vacant for months. Some people thought Shakir was the obvious choice, but LA didn't see it that way. Shakir's calendar was jam-packed for the first quarter. He co-executive produced Rick Ross's sophomore album Trilla and worked on Janet Jackson's project Discipline. He also signed girl group Electric Red. He ventured into TV, co-executive producing the BET reality series Brothers to Brother, a show chronicling the boy band Brother. He was also instrumental in brokering DJ Khaled's We the Best record label signing to Def Jam. He also signed Karina Pacion. L.A. Reid continued to mull over names to replace Jay-Z, but he couldn't think of anyone he deemed qualified, so he didn't choose an actual replacement. He says he did the job himself because he had learned enough from Jay-Z. Instead, L.A. opted to promote Shakir to Executive Vice President of Def Jam while retaining his responsibilities of Senior Vice President of A&R for Island Def Jam Music. Shakir wrestled with the idea, driving around with the contract in his car for 2 weeks. After he signed, he told some people he felt like he had made a deal with the devil. L.A. and Shakir were adamant Shakir was not replacing Jay-Z, but that didn't stop publications like Billboard from saying differently. The media reaction to the hire was mixed, with some going as far as considering Shakir a surprising pick. L.A. said, quote, "While some people thought that he was Jay-Z's replacement, he wasn't. Shakir was many things, but I didn't want to put that kind of pressure on him. I had come to rely on him in so many other important ways." End quote. Shakir's promotion was officially announced on June 3, 2008. But not long after the promotion, LA noticed a change in Shakir while they were on a flight to Las Vegas. LA said, on the plane to Vegas this time, he caught a text about something. I never knew what, and I saw him go dark. After the plane landed, he told me he couldn't stay. Shakir said, I've got something I've got to deal with. I've got to go. Shakir immediately returned to Atlanta. According to LA, things didn't return to normal. He said, quote, the next time I saw him, things weren't right with him. He seemed like he was trying to be the person he had been, a strange imitation of the guy I knew. Something was troubling him. I never knew what it was, end quote. Jermaine Dupri, who by this time was the president of the Island Records Urban Music Division, noticed a change as well. He said, quote, I felt like something was going on differently in his life. He wasn't being the same guy. He had become a darker, more in the office executive. One of Shakir's joys was being in the studio with this artist, but his new position called for more office responsibilities. Apart from other obligations, his personal assistant, Dina Marto, could tell Shakir was different, saying, he definitely wasn't himself. I just took it as he was very, very stressed out. When Dina asked him what was wrong, Shakir responded, it's a lot going on. Dina also said Shakir was sometimes working from 6 in the morning to 3 a.m. at night, and she would have to remind him to eat. In all the years Shakir worked for Island Def Jam, he never officially moved to New York. He kept an apartment in Manhattan, spending 4 days a week in New York and the other 3 in Atlanta. Now with more power, people changed the way they treated Shakir. His friend Jaha Johnson described it, saying, now people got a different agenda when they talk to you. It's not just, can you listen to my music? It's, you control the check. You can change my life. Shakir shifted his work style. He was more unavailable and entered and exited the Def Jam building through a back door. He instructed his assistant Dina not to tell anyone where he was or what he was doing, not even his closest friends. And when traveling out of town, he began using an alias when he checked into hotels. Shakir also hired a personal security detail. And things were crazy with the label roster, particularly young Jeezy. Shortly after Shakir was promoted, BMF member Rafi Sims testified Jeezy was a part of their crime syndicate. BMF indictments and prison sentences were coming down left and right, and Jeezy was convinced he was next. In Jeezy's book, he said, I really don't know how I managed to avoid getting caught up. In July 2008, the highly respected publications Crane's New York Business ran a feature on Shakir. He made a statement that proved haunting, saying, in Atlanta, it's all creative, but I'm in a completely different frame of mind in Manhattan. Around this time, he purchased a 6-bedroom, 7-figure home in the Avignon subdivision of Marietta, Georgia. But according to the Vibe profile, there had been an incident at his previous home. Sources allege a break-in occurred perpetrated by some street dudes he met at work. In the same article, Michelle denied this incident happened. And there were other alleged incidents. According to his godbrother Smacks, quote, somebody from this crew snatched Jeezy's chain and they wanted Shakir to get it back. It was also alleged Shakir ran into a scuffle with some street dudes in New York, but no one could confirm who they were. Friends noticed around August he was not partying as heavily and mellowing out. As if the professional anxiety was not enough, he received crushing personal news. He was highly upset to learn that the man he considered his dad was not his biological father. Shakir shared the news with his friend and fellow music executive Sean Tubby Holiday, telling him, quote, I feel like I've lost my identity. The revelation gnawed at Shakir up until his passing. His godbrother Smacks knew how distressing the news was to Shakir and went to check on him the weekend before Shakir passed. When recalling the visit, Smacks said, that messed him up. That was a big part of his sadness because Shakir was big on family. In September, Michelle asked him why was he acting so strange. According to Michelle, quotes, he said he just had to figure it out, that he had to get a handle on work. So I just tried to make life a little more easier and not complain so much about him being gone, end quote. The couple tried to find some normalcy, and Shakir proposed to Michelle when they visited the island of St. Thomas on October 12, 2008. But less than a week later, on October 18th, his friends were shocked by his paranoia at the BET Hip Hop Awards in Atlanta. While Kenny Burns was at an after party, he heard someone calling his name. When he searched for the voice, he realized it was Shakir, who was hiding in a dark corner. Kenny said, "It was scaring me. Shake would have never been in a corner at no MFing party. He would have been with me, jumping up and down on the couch with some champagne." Jermaine Dupri became increasingly alarmed, saying, "I'm looking at it like, what is going on? I couldn't understand it." On October 25th, going back to the visit from his godbrother Smacks, Shakir vented about the decline of the music industry, namely due to illegal downloading and the recession. Smacks said, quote, "He was just trying to get out. He saw it wasn't fun anymore. He was just an exec on paper, but they didn't give him everything he needed to be successful. They basically said, get the results, make it happen." Jeezy spoke with Shakir around this time and noticed he was, quote unquote, acting a little different. Sean Tubby Holiday spoke with Shakir 4 days before he passed. Tubby said, "I felt like something was wrong. Shakir was out of it. His speech was slurring. He wasn't the energetic, vibrant Shake that I know." On October 29th, Shakir sat in senior staff meetings. The next day, October 30th, remains in controversy. Shakir had a long meeting with LA Reid, with some saying it lasted up to 3 hours. LA shared his version of the day in his book, writing, quote, "Shakir came into my office and sat down, nervous and fidgety. His hands were shaking. He kept trying to tell me something. He was moving his mouth, opening it like he wanted to say something, then he closed it again, unable to get the words out. He looked like he was exhausting himself to say something that he couldn't get out. I was concerned. Everything raced through my head. Is somebody bothering him? Does he have pressure I don't know about? Are there financial issues? What is this?" He left my office without saying anything. Later, I went to his office where I found him staring off into space and tried to hold a conversation. "Whatever's bothering you, let it go," I said. "Take a break. Just let it go. You can take a break. We're fine. You're doing fine. I got your back. There's nothing to worry about. If you need some time, take some time." He simply shook his head and went back to work. In an episode of TV1's Celebrity Crime Files, Shakir's stepfather Aubrey gave a drastically different version of events. Aubrey alleged LA demoted Shakir during the meeting and informed him he would be based out of Atlanta full-time. LA tried to engage with Shakir later on in the day with one of their favorite pastimes, partying. LA said, "A few hours later, I reached him on his cell phone and asked him if he wanted to go to Mariah Carey's masquerade party with me. He met me at the office, and as we drove downtown to the club, he seemed more at ease than he had been earlier. We listened to some music. He loved Morris Day and The Time. In fact, Shakir had conceived Electric Red as a modern-day all-girl version of The Time. At the party, he appeared relaxed, subdued, a little quiet, but at least he could talk. We drove back to my place together, listening to Prince, and shook hands as I left the car. Shakir said, 'That is just jamming.' LA responded, 'I'll talk to you tomorrow.' LA says that was the last time he saw Shakir." Now, many of the details offered regarding Shakir's last weekend come from the Vibe article. The next day, on October 31st, Shakir took a 7 a.m. Delta flight to Atlanta to spend Halloween with Michelle and the kids. He talked with super producer Shakir Stewart about new music and made plans to meet that following Monday. The meeting never happened. When Shakir took his children trick-or-treating that night with their nanny, he didn't have a bodyguard. But as he passed the Halloween decorations, he began to hallucinate. He reportedly said, "Why is this nigga on my heels? Every time I turn around, I see this nigga on my heels." According to Smacks, quote, "He started tripping. I think he felt like somebody was there at the house. He was acting like somebody was after him." When Shakir returned home, he called his godbrother Herb Smith. The two had not talked in weeks, but Shakir told him he and his family were coming to spend the night. Herb, who lived over an hour away, suspected something was wrong. Once Shakir and his family made it to Herb's house, Michelle asked Herb to talk to Shakir. Shakir seemed to have calmed down by the time they went to bed around 3 a.m. As they prepared to leave Herb's house later in the morning, November 1st, Shakir asked Michelle where were they going. Michelle answered, "We're going home." Shakir screamed, "We can't go home!" Michelle texted Max that Shakir was having a nervous breakdown. She then called Herb and asked him to come to their home in Marietta. When Herb arrived at the house, he described the mood as eerie and suggested they turn on music to change the mood. Shakir paced back and forth between the kitchen and master bedroom as Michelle and Herb followed him. They asked him what was going on, but he gave no answers. Herb said, quote, "He couldn't get no words out. He was just frozen. Every car that passed by, he would jump, but he never physically said that somebody was outside." While Shakir was unraveling, Ted Lucas, founder of Slip and Slide Records, sent Shakir an encouraging text. Ted said, quote, "I sent him a scripture from Proverbs about being a true friend. God just put it on my heart to send it to him that day." Shakir was checking his 2 Blackberries obsessively. There was one message in particular he kept staring at. Fearing someone was threatening Shakir, Herb snatched the phone from Shakir to see what was going on. But it was simply an email that read, "Hi, Mr. Stewart. I have a talented individual that you and Mr. Reid may be interested in." Michelle was at a loss about Shakir's behavior, but she was able to convince him to go with her to get a massage. She said he often relied on holistic treatments to handle stress. Shakir took a shower and Michelle helped him get dressed in their master bedroom. But just as quickly as he seemed to stabilize, Shakir started to melt down again. He stared out the window and started to hyperventilate. Suddenly, he told Herb and Michelle they needed to leave the house. Herb called Shakir's personal bodyguard Big John, but Shakir became incensed, saying, "That's not Big John." Herb handed him the phone with Big John on the line, but Shakir threw it back at him. Shakir told Herb to go home to his wife and children and began pushing him. Shakir said, "Herb, you need to leave, man. Go home. Go home." Herb said, "Man, I can't leave you like this." Shakir returned to the kitchen and began to sob. Herb said, quote, "He was hugging me in the kitchen, holding on to me. His son Sebastian saw that and started crying." The nanny took the children downstairs to the basement while Michelle secretly called 911. She then handed the phone to Herb, who went outside to speak with the operator. Shakir, wearing a sweatshirt, jeans, and no shoes, went back to the master bedroom while Michelle apparently remained in the kitchen. While Herb was outside talking to the 911 operator, he heard a shot ring out. He rushed into the house as a second shot rang out. Herb found Shakir on the master bathroom floor, mortally wounded, choking on his own blood. Herb said, "I ran in there and started shaking his leg." Shakir was taken to Kennestone Hospital, where he later passed away at the age of 34. According to the Cobb County Department of Public Safety report, the home showed no signs of forced entry or foul play. Law enforcement determined the weapon used was one of 2 kept in the home. They stated the first shot, which hit the tile floor, was what law enforcement calls a confidence shot, and the second shot caused the mortal wound. According to Cobb County officers, based on the crime scene and timeline of events, quote, "The time from decision to action was almost immediate," end quote. The toxicology report confirmed Shakir was not on antidepressants or illicit substances, and he was not an alcoholic. It was ruled Shakir passed away by his own hand. Shakir's passing sent shockwaves throughout the industry. Through Def Jam, Michelle released a statement that read in part, quote, "Over the past several weeks, Shakir's behavior was inconsistent with the man we all know and love. As much as we all tried to help him, Shakir was in deep pain and largely suffering in silence. Please remember Shakir for who he was, a wonderful father, partner, son, and friend," end quote. While Shakir was in crisis, he gave a startling message. In a yet-to-be-released documentary Michelle did on Shakir's life, she says Shakir said he felt like he had sold his soul to the devil and no longer recognized himself in the mirror. A memorial service was held on November 7, 2008 at his alma mater Morehouse at the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel. The church was packed, with attendees wearing maroon ribbons. Fat Joe spoke, reading the biblical passage Matthew 6, 1-4. Neo sang, "It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday." Shakir's actual funeral was a small, private service. Many have said Reid did not attend, but according to Michelle, he did. But LA sat in the back to himself and left after only a few minutes. Michelle and the children immediately started therapy as she and his friend Jaha Johnson worked on Shakir's estate. Despite being an astute businessman, Shakir's personal affairs were in disarray. According to friends, he passed away without an insurance policy for his children. A fund for donations benefiting Michaela and Sebastian was set up in lieu of flowers for his memorials. The controversy around Shakir's passing muddied Reid's reputation. He first spoke of losing Shakir in the Vibe article, with many finding his responses to be flippant and callous. When asked if Shakir was under too much pressure as executive vice president of Def Jam, LA quipped, quote, "Do you know what it is, honey? More money. He didn't have more responsibilities or some issue he didn't know about or some more meetings. No. It was just, go find another Jeezy. Go find another Ross." In his book, he spoke of Shakir in a more tapered tone, saying about his passing, quote, "I never looked to Shakir the way I looked to Babyface. They'd occupied different roles and had done different things for me. But it wasn't until that moment that I realized how much he'd come to fill that role as my partner in crime. More than that, though, he was my best friend. I'm not fast to have friends. I don't open up to people. I don't tell people much about myself, and I don't ask much about them. I'm not sure I know how to be a good friend, but I was a friend to Shakir, and he was a friend to me. I never knew what happened, and how can you make sense of something like that anyway? Whatever his problems were, he kept them hidden from me. To this day, I miss him. The loss was devastating, the darkest point of my life. I couldn't go to work and stayed home day after day. Every 5 minutes or so, I break down crying. I was effed up, confused, angry. Then I started hearing word that people were pointing their fingers at me because they said I put too much pressure on him. That made me angry for an entirely different set of reasons. I had just lost my best friend. My company had lost a superstar executive. The industry had lost a leader, and his 2 children had lost their father. LA managed grief by throwing himself into work, namely focusing on Justin Bieber, who was signed right before Shakir passed. Shakir's influence and creative methodology was a part of Justin's 2010 debut album, My World 2.0. Justin even acknowledged Shakir in the album Thank Yous and partially dedicated the album in his honor. Shakir was posthumously inducted into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame in 2009. His children, fiancée Michelle, mother Portia, and Kenneth, the father who raised him, attended. Michelle and his parents gave moving speeches, with his daughter Michaela's speech stealing the show. But it was another beautiful moment gone awry. The family went backstage, but their mics were still hot. An argument broke out amongst them, with one of the female relatives yelling, "Get the F off me! Don't touch me!" The argument was audible for the audience and viewers at home. Shakir's artists grieved him heavily. Jeezy said, "You see somebody with such a great spirit and you never know what they're going through. As much ish as me and Shakir talked about, I felt if I had took the time to talk to him more about what was going on personally, maybe I could have understood the chain of events. Sometimes we lose great people. He was a confidant, a friend, and he was out here on the front line with me. Any project I ever do, I still give Shakir an executive producer credit. He didn't seem like an executive. He seemed like your brother." End quote. In Rick Ross's memoir, Hurricanes, he wrote, "I couldn't believe it, and I didn't know what to believe. There were so many crazy rumors going around, that Shakir had been unalived, that he had been living a double life. It effed me up. With Shakir gone, I didn't know what my future at Def Jam would look like. As much as I liked and respected L.A. Reid, his support and guidance was never hands-on like Shakir's was. Shakir had been the glue that held everything together. He was the best A&R I'd ever worked with. He had a rare gift of being able to connect the sound of the streets with the mainstream. That wasn't going to be easy to replace." End quote. Shakir Stewart's name is re-emerging to the public as Sean Diddy Combs, and to a lesser extent, L.A. Reid, find their legacies in peril. Clearly, Shakir's family and friends have more they want to say, but who knows what other developments might lie ahead. But Shakir's legacy in music is one that should have never gotten lost in the abyss of celebrity conspiracy. Although he left at only 34, people around the world are still moving to something he had a hand in creating. And in an era where the position of A&R was golden, he might still be the best from his generation to do it. Thank you for being a part of this episode. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. To learn more about us, you can visit our website at www.BlackAmericanamedia.com to keep up with the culture and to sign up for our newsletter. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. See you soon.